Something new for you. It's called Ask DC. You can ask Destination Calcio, kind of like a call center these days. Emmet Gates and Dan Cancian are here. We're going to respond to some of the comments, especially the YouTube comments, some on TikTok, on Facebook and Instagram as well. So thanks for engaging with us there. We've got one, put a video up of Erik ten Hag, a nice short. He was seen at the Stadio Olimpico at Roma Juventus. Someone actually wrote, God bless them. They are doomed. He'll probably bring Onana with him as well. That was Bernie Columbus on YouTube. And please tell me he's not going to coach Roma next season. Thomas Roma on TikTok says that. Dan, we'll throw it to you because as a Manchester United supporter, you've had Ten Hag.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't really end up well. I suppose he ended up well for him in the sense that he won 2 trophies in 2 seasons. But I don't think you can be too snarky about Ten Hag when you've had the likes of Rudy Garcia and even Erik sitting in the dugout.
Erik is the top level that you can get surely at Roma.
You would imagine so. But well, you say this now, watch him surface at Torino again next season at some point.
Yeah, you never know. Well, he did well there, actually.
Or he might end up at Lyon once Paulo Fonseca gets sacked inevitably from there as well. But no, I mean, look, United was never the right job for Ten Hag. I think we can all agree on that. We were actually having this conversation with Emmet at the weekend. I do think that he will do well in Serie because Serie A's football is a lot more structured than...
Can you repeat what he did at Ajax, though? Because that's why he was hired by Manchester United. And could he do that in Serie A? I'm not sure. Ajax is basically, it's the biggest fish in the pond.
Yeah.
And I think even maybe one of us could win a title with Ajax if we got the job.
Well, if you want to go,
not with the current squad.
He's not gonna be doing what he did at Ajax, playing attractive football and like taking on the likes of Real Madrid and Juventus and destroying them. But I do think that he's maybe not easily, but he could feasibly win a European trophy with Roma. And like cup football, actually, Ten Hag was really good at cup football at United. Won the League Cup, won the FA Cup. Is he going to win the Scudetto? No. But that's not because of his football philosophy. It's just because there is not enough money that Roma have at their disposal to sign the players required.
Well, he had the money at United and still couldn't challenge for the title there. I guess Manchester City, that far.
Well, he couldn't challenge for the title, I agree. I think the expectations are completely different. Though. Like United, you need to come in and you need to win everything there is to win. And here, his stock was so high because of what did Ajax. I think at Roma now will be a different dynamic. It will be a case of can he rebuild his career? And I mean,
well, let me ask you.
He's done it again.
That's a hat trick there.
I'm gonna move him.
That's half a dozen fouls on George Weah.
Well, football in the 90s was a lot rougher than it is now.
It's your final warning.
But you speak of philosophy. Can a Dutch manager excel in Italian football? Because throughout history, the Dutch philosophy was the polar opposite of the Italian methodology. Has there been a Dutch manager that's ever done well in Serie A?
Arrigo Sacchi with his Dutch combo.
Yeah. But he took
at a time.
He was a fusion of Italianness with
has
the
there
Dutch.
ever been a Dutch manager in Serie A to begin with?
Yeah, like I can't think of any.
Well, Ten Hag was at the Olimpico. Does that count? So.
I suppose. No, I think
one of the De Boers was at Inter for a cup of coffee.
Oh, yes.
During the Bonte years.
That was...
But can the Dutch model or the Ajax model that Ten Hag would inevitably use, could it work in Italian football?
I think it could. I think the issue with him in England is they didn't have... It was set up to fail from the start because United, and we're going back to what we were talking about earlier about football directors. There was no football structure at United. He came in and he was effectively manager and a general manager, which is why he ended up signing effectively everybody he knew from Ajax because it seemed like he had no other pool to source his players from. But I think there were spells when you could see what it was, the tactics and the philosophy he was trying to implement. Whether that's going to work in Italy, I think it might work. Football in Italy is a bit slower and there is an element of, I suppose, he's not going to go to Roma and he's not going to be asked to win the league. Roma are not going to win the league. Not with him, not with Jurgen Klopp or Pep Guardiola in charge. The league is between the likes of Napoli because Antonio Conte is world-class manager, Inter Milan because they have the best manager in Europe in a minute and the best team in Europe. And
Highest paid squad. Yeah.
And squad. With Roma, I mean, Mourinho, he wasn't picked Mourinho and he won a European trophy with Roma and he made it on the final. There is no reason why Ten Hag can't do that. Now, then we can debate whether winning Europa League or Europa Conference League is success or not. I think it is.
For Roma,
For Roma, I think it is.
Yeah.
I agree. I completely agree. I think it is success. At the minute, they're not going to be challenging for anything more than
No.
5th, 6th place, maybe.
Yeah, when you've got Gianluca Mancini as your big hitter at the back.
And Brian Cristante in midfield.
Yeah,
No,
I think
exactly.
That's as good
If
as it gets.
anything, I do think that maybe he could. I think that a couple of players coming up from the Dutch league or maybe in Germany, because he now coached in Germany as well. There may be a case of Roma maybe like unearthing some gems from there, because also is crucified for the signing he made at United, and rightly so. But
I'll tell you a player that he unearthed from Spain, and we'll end it with this comment here, and I'm sure Dan will agree, Emmet. Casemiro was his best signing. So we'll move on from Ten Hag and let's go to last week's episode where we spoke to Serie A North America CEO Andy Mitchell. Great chat there. We discussed a few things and you guys have had your say in the comments. Michael Laurenti, that we know as Baggio Baby, he features in the Catania video, the All You Need to Know. He says, because we did ask a question there, have your say, how do you think that Serie A North America can help improve? He says, I believe to reach out to American fans, we have to start with the Federazione Italiana Gioco Calcio and the world, that basically is the FIGC, the Italian Football Federation, and the world famous Italian jerseys. Once we have attracted fans, then they can branch off to Serie A. I think there's a clear distinction between Italian Americans loving Italy, the Italian national football team, and loving Serie A. Very different. Thoughts? I'd have to agree. From an Australian viewpoint, just to butt in here, I asked you for your thoughts, but I'll go. We Italians in Australia loved Italy above the national team. We actually we are attached to that a lot more than what we are to any specific club. And it also gets to the point, and Dan will probably have a visceral reaction to this, is that as Italians living abroad in the diaspora, even if you're a Milan fan and Inter plays in the Champions League final, they'll probably support Inter in that final. And that's because it falls under the flag of Italy. Mm. So, and I know that you experienced that in Australia yourself, Dan. So there is a big attachment to the Italian flag, the Azzurro jersey, the Baggios and the Maldinis. If you asked Italians living in America or Australia or England who their favorite player is, it is always someone that did well for Italy over someone that did well in Serie A or in the Champions League. And that's the way it's always been. That might change with the younger generations, we'll say, with the Juventus. So, Dan, what do you think? Emmet, what do you think?
I mean,
Dan's speechless.
I think, for a start, to Baggio Baby's point, Italy actually need to start qualifying for World Cups again. Because I'd imagine, obviously, never been to Australia, I would imagine that the support for Italy come out loudest and brightest when Italy were at tournaments.
I suggest that Australians jump on the bandwagon here. That would be
the distinction between Australians and Italians. They both jump on bandwagons, but for different reasons. So I can tell you another thing. When Australia played Italy in the World Cup in 2006, the streets were packed. Australians, and I will say this into the camera, Australians didn't understand what soccer was, and they couldn't understand the rules around specific decisions, don't understand what constitutes a penalty. In rugby, we can do this. Why can't we do it in soccer? So we had a lot of those. We had bricks going through the windows because Italy, everyone knows Italy ended up getting through. Fabio Grosso with that bizarre Lucas Neal challenge and the penalty coming, and then Totti doing the chucho, and it was in dedication to his baby. That there was a lot of football elements that Aussies didn't understand. So let me just stamp out that point there. Yeah. But yes, Australians are bandwagon leapers and jumpers by nature. And that is because they're sports mad. They are absolutely sports mad. When the rugby league team's crap, they'll jump to AFL, they'll jump to football when it's World Cup time. All my family were telling me how football was the next big thing back then. And, we'd seen it come in waves in Australia. you make the World Cup a year later, no one cares because they've gone back to rugby league.
Which is why, to the point that Michael is making here, it's you can't base expansion in the US in this case just on the national team, because the national team is at the center of everyone's mind in America, in Australia, in South Africa.
But
in
is it the
Argentina.
gateway drug to Serie A?
But it's only in their minds for what? The World Cup? The World Cup happens once every 4 years. Okay, maybe the Euros. So
But it's happening there.
No, I know.
Italy made the
but
final
what I
there.
mean is, suppose, yes, but should have been the case in '94, wasn't it? Everyone was saying, "Oh, that's the next frontier."
Football's a lot more developed there now,
That's-
30 years later.
I think the thing
Yes.
is, if there's going to be a trickle down, like Michael's point is that, they fall in love with Italy, the Azzurri, and then that trickles down.
Which I agree with.
In the Serie A clubs.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Italy have to do well. Like, they actually have
That's
to
what I mean.
qualify.
If they have to
for a
be
World-
there.
Yeah, they have to
Exactly,
be
yeah.
there.
Not on holidays watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if Italy, say, turn up and it's like South Africa 2010 where they finished bottom in a group of New Zealand and Paraguay and Slovakia, is anyone really going to care about their clubs after that? So you need a good Italy if there's going to be a trickle-down effect and they're going to then branch off into Juve, Milan and Inter. And
But even so, I think there is also a different element that we should mention here, I think. Because, yes, that's very true what Emmet is saying about the fact that Italy need to be there. But also, I mean, I don't know, but I think like if you go, it's like with the Premier League. If you go abroad, and like when I speak to like British experts abroad, there's always the big clubs. It's United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Spurs. And it's just, I imagine it's the same for Italy. And now the likes of Juventus, the likes of AC Milan aren't doing that well. The likes of Napoli were in the doldrums for so long. So there is an element of, I want to get into Serie A. Italy may be doing great at the World Cup next year. But am I going to follow Bologna? Am I going to follow Fiorentina? Now, the football fan in me will say, yes, you absolutely should, because they're an amazing story. But we all know that if you're a casual fan, you're a casual fan for a reason. So you may not be interested in, the likes of Zappacosta at Atalanta. Why care about Zappacosta at Atalanta or Skorupski at Bologna when all I can think of is, Rafa Leao at Milan, even though they're down in 9th position and, they might not even make the Europa Conference League. So,
But surely what we're talking about here is how the World Cup can make people aware. It's about awareness that Serie A exists. These are new eyeballs they're trying to bring over. And then once you make them aware that it exists, they go and see the elite level of football. And then they say, okay, this is great. I have an MLS club. I may have a Premier League club. I may have a Dutch club, whatever it is. And then they may, spread their wings and go and take a look at Serie A. It's on Paramount there. You can see it in Canada. You can see it in Mexico. Destination Calcio is there as well for Serie B. So there is a trickle-down effect, like Emmet was saying. And I think we'll just wrap up the point there. But the main point that Michael was saying was that Italian Americans are attached to the Azzurro shirt more than they are Serie A. And I think that's where the plans are around the World Cup, to try and get a new audience. And you can go watch this in the interview that we've done with the CEO, Andy Mitchell, for all the other really good things that he said, because he did divulge a lot of things and then he expanded on it. So the attachment to the Azzurro shirt is there, and we have to hope that Italy make that World Cup. Let's move on. Rocco Mezzogiorno says the best advertisement for Italian football is the national team. So he agrees with Baggio Bebe. And the national team is dying a slow death as Serie A clubs no longer feed the national team with quality Italians. This is getting deep here. Allowing Serie A clubs to field an extraordinary amount of average foreigners instead of growing Italian youngsters in these roles is either blind foolishness or intentional self-sabotage. Either way, any other well-managed company would see these results and they'd be instantly dismissed. So there's a lot there to unpack.
This is actually a podcast in itself.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
this is a deep question.
Bosman ruling did have an effect.
I was going to say, I mean, you could take this paragraph and just swap out Serie A for Ligue 1 or Premier League.
I'm not so sure about Premier League. I think the Bosman ruling helped the Premier League.
The Premier League is riddled with average foreign players.
But there's still a better caliber than the average foreign players in other leagues, I think.
Yes, but
there's always clubs getting hoodwinked over prodigious talents.
Sure. The point is that like England have been superb for years now at under 19, under 21 levels. They never get across over the line when it comes to the World Cup, the Euros, and it's not.
Well, 2 Euros finals. Come on. It's been superb.
And we've got nothing to show for that.
Okay, not in the trophy cabinet, but
Well, that's
making
what you
2
play.
finals
That's-
is fairly epic compared. Okay, England had the Beckhams, the Nevilles, the who else in it, Lampards, and all those
Gerrard,
players,
Scholes,
and
Rio,
and the Shearers, and still couldn't get to a final.
No, it's an improvement of sorts, but still.
You can't win everything that you.
But you can win
Hey,
something.
they're making World Cups for a start. Italy is not.
Thankfully,
So-
by the way, England don't win anything.
Yeah, for the Irish lad here, it's the Irish in Emmet. But look, I think to back up this point, part of this, the 10 points he's got there, is that Serie A clubs are fielding an extraordinary amount of average foreign talents, or foreign talents that are no better than what.
Yeah, well, I think
Perhaps is
That's the
there.
thing.
I think
that's what he means.
it's
There's no-
been stifling the growth of young players.
Yeah,
That's
this is
sure.
not anti-foreign rant.
no,
Let's put it
but
into
it's just,
context.
It's true. It's I mean, you look at, was it Spalletti said, or Mancini, that he, out of all the players in Serie A, there was only 33% qualified to play for Italy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, that's shocking.
They're all in Serie B. In case you're going to watch them, go watch them in Serie G, and FIFA Plus shows Serie G. We show Serie B. So go and check that out. DCTV app, iOS and Android. Go ahead. Shameless plug. So look, we could talk about that all day, but
Yeah.
the final point is any other well-managed company, they'd be dismissed. So is that a scathing attack on the league itself, Lega Serie A, or
The thing
is
is,
it aimed at
it's-
there?
I mean,
is it aimed at the clubs? or?
Every crisis that Italy has, if they don't qualify for a World Cup or they don't do well, it's like, we're going to reform. Do you remember they brought in Baggio after South Africa 2010 as like the FIGC technical director along with Arrigo Sacchi? Baggio presented this, I don't know how many pages presentation.
I think 700.
Oh yeah, it was something ridiculous on how to restructure the youth teams and how to play a certain way.
No one's ready.
They didn't do nothing. He resigned. Then Sacchi resigned a couple of years after that. There's always talk of reform, but they never do anything about it because at the end of the day, it comes down to cold, hard cash.
But can you reform something that the EU Parliament has legislated for? You can't reform against the Bosman ruling.
Yeah,
Of course you can't.
Not
And
in
also-
terms
clubs
of
are just
And
Yeah,
also,
just playing by the
there is
rules.
an element of that which comes down to call that cash, but probably not the way you mean it. If you had the likes of, say, Udinese or, maybe
Bologna?
No, maybe not Bologna, but
Torino?
Udinese or like someone like Parma,
Okay.
and you've got access to this pool of like European players, and you know that you can sign them, develop into something, and then sell them off for 30, 50 millions to
Only Premier League clubs or PSG.
Exactly, two
That's all,
Premier
that's all
League
you're going to
clubs
get,
or
or
PSG.
Saudi.
And that is your entire financial model right there. And you can't do that if you only have to go through, because, statistically, if you can only access one country, you have, 10, 15 players coming through the youth ranks. If you can get them from everywhere in Europe, you're going to have like 10 times as many. And then you can sell them off for a profit.
I mean,
That is
There are clubs out there that only field Italian players.
There are.
So most of them are in the lower divisions, and of course you can't develop a squad of 20 young Italians into a Serie A side. Of course they're going to get
Because
picked
I
off.
think the counterpoint to this is also the people think that like if you only field the young Italians, or over there if you only field the young English players, that'll be phenomenal. That's not the case. It's not how football works.
and I do think that was Berlusconi's mandate when he took over at Monza. It was like, we're going to build an Italian Monza, showcase the best Italian talent and whatever else. But I do think it comes down to not to go too deep in this, but
Arrigo
I
loved
think
him.
we talk. I think we. I can't remember, David, where me and you were, but we were talking to. Oh, it was Catania, and we were talking to the press officer, and I was asking him. We were talking about the state of Italian football at youth level, and I asked him, "Do Italian kids still play football as much as they did in the 60s, 70s, 80s? Do they play outside?" And he was like, he said, in the south they do, but in the north they don't. They're distracted by other things or whatever. So maybe there is an argument or a case to look at. Are Italian kids, the young generation, are they as obsessed with football as the generations coming before? And that's why there's not talent.
We're going to move on from this
And
point.
also,
but
we should not forget the Serie A, the Serie A isn't there to service the Italian FA, just like the Premier League isn't there to service the English FA. They are private entities.
Yeah.
And they run themselves as they see fit and for their own benefits.
And there are rules
And that is
regarding work and employment that you cannot.
That is the bottom line, unfortunately.
So yeah, look, I'm sure Lega Serie A have some of the blame. I'm sure the clubs have some of the blame, and I think the EU Parliament and maybe Bosman himself for putting the papers in has created a big
and the Italian
tsunami
FA,
of
and the Italian
change.
FA has some of the blame as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Jamie Vass says Serie A needs to reduce the gap to the English Premier League by the end of the decade rather than focus on matching it. I agree, because closing the gap will make European competition games between clubs from both countries more balanced and competitive while providing a platform to eventually eliminate the gap. So that's something that Andy was trying to address. I've just found mine.
You see? There we go.
Beppe. So I've got his shirt up as well over there. But yeah, it is about eliminating the gap rather than trying to match the Premier League. No one can match the Premier League.
When we talk about eliminating the gap, are we talking about eliminating the gap in terms of popularity abroad, or are we talking?
I think it's trying to close
the financial, like making.
It's financial. It's making money. It's about making money.
Yeah.
And being able to lure or at least keep the talent here. The Tonalis, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, when would you have ever expected someone from that Milan golden age team of whether it's the 90s or whether it's 2006 to transfer to a club like Newcastle?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
no offense to Newcastle supporters.
It obviously helps because Newcastle are backed by
They're
Saudi
loaded,
owners, and they've got Premier League TV money, and
they've got 70 million. It doesn't matter where they get the money from.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they've got 70 million to lure Sandro Tonali. So he preferred to go to Newcastle than go to a United or to a Liverpool, for example.
Again, no disrespect to Newcastle fans, but I'm fairly certain Tonali actually didn't want to go, and he was pushed.
And also he had the gambling issue, which I think Milan wanted to move him on just so that they didn't have to deal with the aftermath of that. But that's another story. But getting off Tonali, for example, there are other players that leave. Victor Osimhen wants to go to United or he wants to go to PSG for the money more than anything. Winning a Scudetto with Napoli is great. I get he's done that. And so now
But is it a case of money or is it a case of saying the Premier League is... Wherever you go in the world, you'll find someone watching the Premier League. It's just that big. So yes, the money, obviously, but
maybe United is the wrong analogy here because we need to say someone that might go to Bournemouth, from Juventus. Dean
well,
Hughson.
I was gonna say, I think like the likes of Evan Nilsson going from Porto to Bournemouth is far more significant for the state of Serie A than like Tonali leaving Milan because they're
bypassing Serie A to go straight there. Yeah.
Wasn't it 2 years ago that Bournemouth outbid Milan? I can't remember what the player was, but Bournemouth were offering 30 million and Milan were offering, a packet of crisps and a drink.
It depends what flavour.
Yeah, that's true. If it was something
I
vinegar,
mean,
Do you know the Più Gusto, the picante ones?
some of the championship clubs have spent more than some clubs in Serie A.
Yeah,
absolutely. And look at what Serie B spends. I mean, they spend a pittance. I mean, you're lucky to see a
on
transfer
their
fee at all.
As well.
Yeah.
We'll get
And
into that a bit later.
I think it all the start, like, not to go too deep into the weeds with this, but the starting block is stadiums. Serie A teams need stadiums because that's where you maximize revenue. You get better players. The TV deal then grows on the back of that, and so
the
on
councils
and so on.
are getting in the way.
Yeah, because the only way to close the gap is for Serie A to speed up because the Premier League isn't slowing down anytime soon.
No.
Yes, the domestic rights.
I don't even think the Premier League's speeding up. They're just doing what they're doing.
The domestic rights are flat line.
Cruise control.
The foreign TV rights in the Premier League are enormous compared to Serie A. Like we've written so many pieces about this.
Yeah.
The numbers are staggering.
Yeah,
It's staggering. And when I guess, like Andy Mitchell says in that interview, it's not about trying to become the Premier League.
Yeah.
It's
No.
about being the best continental
Yeah.
league and having the best pull. And I guess that's where they believe that there is scope to spread out.
If
People
you're the best of the rest, you are already, well on your way to becoming. I mean, Serie A is, I suppose. There's maybe someone still think the Serie A is like we should be what Serie A was in the 90s. That is not.
And we're wearing 390s kits here.
Yes.
So this is what Serie A was.
Yeah.
94,
But this is
Coppa Italia winning side, Parma, epic.
That's never coming back, though, let's be honest.
No.
I don't think. Look, I think there's still elements of that in Serie A because a lot of players will choose to come to Serie A based on the history of it.
Oh, no, completely. But what I'm saying is like you're never going to be back at the point where Serie A was the best league in terms of players. And
Maybe not in our lifetime. But
No.
I think there's a lot. If pretend, we'll finish off with this. I want you to. This is my grand plan for Italy. So when I run for politics, you'll know who to vote for.
Please don't.
But It'll be Serie A only on TV, Serie B only on TV. But imagine Italy
Compulsory
has to
cappuccinos
rebuild.
before what?
No cappuccinos after 10:59 a.m. But imagine that at some point, the European countries basically have to ditch the old buildings. We've got the old stadiums and that. Where would you rather be? Would you rather be in the sunny climes of Italy, enjoying the Adriatic coast, the Amalfi, smelling the crisp summer air and playing your football there? Or would you rather be in Swindon? Or would you rather be in Hull?
Sure.
I'm sure there's other better places in the UK.
I was going to say
live
the
here. I love it here.
The
but yeah.
counterpoint to that is that you could be stuck in an industrial area just outside of Milan, and you're thinking actually Swindon may be quite a ticket.
Sure.
You could be in Foggia.
But, okay, let's just talk about the rural areas, because if you're in Catanzaro, for example, great striker there, Pietro Gemello, but if you're there, I'd rather be playing my football there, earning the same, if I could earn the same money as what I would from a championship club like, I don't know, whether it's, Ipswich, they're going back down, but somewhere like that. I'd rather be there than there. So if it was a like-for-like situation, the same money, I think we'd see a migration of footballers, whether they be foreign or Italian or whatever, that want to stay here rather than just go. There's a lot of youngsters that want to leave Italy, just like the waves of immigrants that have left before, my family included, to go for better countries with better pay, better jobs.
In fairness, there have been lots of players even from England moving over to Serie A now. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't say loads.
But there's been more than in the last
than-
20 years, 25 years. Like after
the 80s, there was a few, and now we've seen that
but
again.
seems like
once Platt and Gazza and Paul Ince left, there was no one really.
yeah.
David Platt years, shout out to David Platt. But once they left in like 97, Paul Ince was the last one to leave. There was no one. Beckham coming like
And so
2009.
Robbie Keane was Irish as well.
Yeah, Robbie
so-
Keane, he was there for a cup of coffee and then he went to Leeds. But
Scored a hat trick though.
yeah, and the Italian Super Cup in
Yeah.
2000. But
Well,
there's sorry, not that good. Again,
For the sake of cutting this down under 2 hours, our editors are not happy with this at the moment. We're just rambling.
Ask me anything.
This may
because-
not make it to YouTube, so if you're seeing it, well, it was a miracle. But yeah,
But there are more English players and more, say, Scottish players now than there has been in the last 20, 25 years, I would think. So there are English players are having more broader mind.
but I also think they're better players than what there's a bigger pool of better players from those nations.
I'll go as far as saying that like the snobbery about Serie A is snobbery among the fans, not among the players. Because you see, as Emmet said, a lot of players are actually like, you know what, I love to go over and play. And the more high-profile players you get in Serie A from Britain, then more players will follow. The likes of Scott McTominay, singing the praise of living in Naples, playing Serie A.
Yeah.
Lewis Ferguson.
And we're
telling us
loving
the
it.
same
We're
thing.
loving it. We go and chase them for
Exactly.
interviews like what you've done
Billy
with
Gilmore,
Lewis.
Shea Adams.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that you'll see a bigger influx.
And go and watch that Lewis Ferguson. Dan went over there and had a little chat with him. A good 23 minutes. You can see that on the DCTV app as well. Let's finish with one more, and we'll just have no more than 20 words on this each. Santino Mamone says he wishes to see a Serie A match played in Australia. Now, I think, Emmet, I'll let you go.
I'll give you 2 words. Absolutely never.
All right, you had 28 left if you want to use them.
No chance.
Okay, you got 27. I think I'll probably go. I'll use your time in mine. The reason why there will be no Serie A in Australia ever, I think, and at least the next 10 lifetimes, is because the logistics of getting a team, 2 teams even, to go there. It's so beyond it's already a struggle for Lega Serie A to get 2 Serie A teams to play together in Italy. You try and take Italian logistics over to the other side of the world. I think Elon Musk is going to have more chance to take him to Mars. So, Australia, it's a different time zone that, 11 hours ahead at the moment. It's not going to work for TV rights. It's not going to work for a lot of things. The only chance it is, and we've seen it with the Cups, and we discussed it on last week's pod, is Cup matches, summer tours, and that's pretty much
a
it.
Supercoppa
Basta.
Italiana.
All right, you've
a Supercoppa
I've used all
Italiano
your
there.
words, pals. All right, we're going to wrap it up there, but send your comments, keep engaging with us, keep the conversation going. If you want to respond to, if Rocco and Michael and Santino and Jamie want to respond to what we've said, get in the comments, dig through the weeds. We've said a lot more than you guys did, but thank you for sending those in. You have kept us going for an episode. We're going to ask you to use that hashtag AskDestinationCalcio for that. So get on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and also TikTok.